Some betrayals cut deeper than a knife. Some mistakes are impossible to undo. If I had paid attention to the warning signs, maybe things would have ended differently. But I didn't. And by the time I saw the truth, it was already too late. There were two daughters in that family, two girls raised under the same roof, but treated like they were from different worlds. Cindy, the older one, was quiet, hardworking, and self-sufficient. She wasn't the type to demand attention or seek validation. She built her own path, working in IT and carving out a future for herself without expecting handouts. She was the daughter from their father's first marriage, and it was obvious that she had always been treated like an outsider. Then there was Millie, the youngest, the favorite, the princess of the house. She had everything Cindy didn't. Stunning beauty, endless confidence, and the ability to make people bend to her will. She was ambitious, charming when she wanted to be, and cruel when she didn't get her way. Their parents adored her, spoiled her, and made sure she always had what she wanted. Cindy, on the other hand, barely seemed to exist in their eyes. The time, I didn't think much of it. If anything, I was too busy chasing my own success to dwell on family dynamics that weren't mine to fix. I worked in a major corporation and was quickly climbing the ranks. I had a reputation for getting things done. No excuses, no hesitation. My boss valued me because I could handle high-pressure deals and make the right decisions when it mattered. Wasn't the type to waste time on distractions. But one night, all of that changed. It was my birthday. My friends insisted on dragging me out to a club to celebrate, even though I would have been just as happy having a quiet drink at home. They wouldn't take no for an answer, and before I knew it, I was standing in a crowded VIP lounge, sipping whiskey and half listening to conversations I didn't care about. That's when I saw her. Millie. She was there with my friend, laughing, flipping her hair over her shoulder, completely in control of the room without even trying. She wasn't just beautiful, she was electric. Every move, every glance, every smirk carried an energy that pulled people in. I wasn't planning to make a move, but my friend, seeing how I looked at her, leaned in and chuckled. "Relax, man. It's not serious. She's fun, but definitely not my type. And honestly," he shrugged, "she's expensive. Not really in my budget." He wasn't joking. Millie had a taste for the finer things in life. Champagne, designer dresses, VIP lounges. She carried herself like someone who expected to be spoiled. And, yet, something about her drew me in. When our eyes met, it felt like she already knew, like she had already decided that I was worth her time. That was how she operated, confident, unapologetic, and always in control. By the end of the night, we were inseparable. Being with Millie was like being on a roller coaster with no brakes. She was unpredictable, always chasing the next thrill, and she pulled me along for the ride. I had spent years focused on work, discipline, and structure. Millie shattered all of that. With her, every night was an adventure. Every weekend was a new experience. We traveled, partied, and lived like nothing else mattered, and for a while, I didn't care. I was hooked on the energy she brought into my life, on the way she made everything feel exciting. We got married a year later. Her parents welcomed me with open arms. To them, I was a perfect match. A man on the rise, someone who could provide the life their daughter deserved. They approved of me not because of who I was, but because of what I could offer. That should have been my first red flag. At the wedding, I met Cindy for the first time. She was quiet, reserved, and different. Unlike the rest of her family, she didn't put on a fake smile or try to impress anyone. She was polite but distant, and the way her parents treated her caught me off guard. While they showered Millie with attention, Cindy was practically invisible. They barely spoke to her, barely acknowledged her existence. It didn't sit right with me. But I was too caught up in my own life to question it. Marriage wasn't like dating. At first, things were still exciting. Weekend getaways, expensive dinners, the rush of being newlyweds. But life doesn't stay in a honeymoon phase forever. Was working harder than ever, locked into one of the most important projects of my career. The company was expanding, and my boss had put me in charge of negotiations for a major contract. It was a huge responsibility, and I poured everything into it. Millie? She didn't understand. She was used to my attention, used to being the center of my world. And now that I was focused on work, she started looking for ways to entertain herself. At first, it was harmless. Spa days, shopping trips, weekend outings with her friends. But soon it became something more. She became obsessed with perfection, her body, her image, her status. She started spending hours at the gym, hiring personal trainers, pushing herself to look like the flawless Instagram models she followed. And I noticed something else. She wasn't just looking for self-improvement. She was looking for validation. The way she carried herself changed. The way she spoke to me changed. She became more demanding, more impatient, more distant, and I was too busy to stop it. The shift one night, I invited her to a corporate event. It was supposed to be a simple gathering, a chance to introduce her to my colleagues, to show her the world I lived in. She stole the spotlight immediately. People noticed her, they admired her, and she thrived on the attention. But there was one person in particular who noticed her more than anyone else. My boss. That night changed everything, because after that event, Millie didn't just want to be my wife. She wanted to be in my world. She wanted power, and I made the biggest mistake of my life. I helped her get a job at my company. At the time, I thought I was doing something good, supporting her, giving her a chance to find her own success. But I didn't realize that I wasn't bringing her into my world. I was bringing in my biggest enemy. The night of the corporate event was supposed to be nothing more than an introduction, a chance for Millie to meet my colleagues, to see the world I had built for myself through years of relentless work. I should have known better. She walked into that room like she owned it. I had seen her, confident before, seen her charm her way through parties and social circles. But this was different. This wasn't a casual gathering at a nightclub or a dinner with friends. This was a room filled with executives, business sharks, and industry leaders. And yet she carried herself like she was the most important person there, and in a way, by the end of the night, she was. Everyone noticed her. My colleagues, who usually only talked about market trends and profit margins, suddenly found themselves captivated. The younger employees wanted to be around her, hanging on to her every word. The older ones, the ones who mattered, smiled at her like she was some rare, fascinating creature. And my boss? He couldn't take his eyes off her. I caught the way he looked at her, the way he laughed a little too easily at her jokes, the way his gaze lingered just a second too long. At the time, I brushed it off. He was just being polite, right? I should have paid more attention. That night, on the way home, Millie was practically buzzing with excitement. "I loved that," she said, leaning back in her seat, her fingers tapping against the window. "It felt powerful." I chuckled, thinking she was just impressed by the event. "Yeah? Well, it's a different kind of crowd than you're used to." She turned to me, eyes sharp. "I want in." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want to work there. Your company. Your boss likes me, right? I could be your assistant or something." I hesitated. Millie had never shown the slightest interest in my job before. She liked the status it gave her, sure. The nice apartment, the vacations, the expensive dinners. But she had never cared about the work itself. And yet, something about the way she said it told me she wasn't joking. She wanted in. I should have said no. I should have told her that my work was separate, that it wasn't a place for games or ambition-driven power plays. But I was an idiot. Instead, I pulled some strings, used my connections, and got her a job. It wasn't a high position, just an assistant role. But that didn't matter. Millie wasn't the type to stay at the bottom. From the moment she walked in on her first day, everything changed. She dressed sharper than any other assistant in the company. She commanded attention, made sure she was noticed in every room she entered, and people noticed. She started acting differently, too. At home, she had always been a little demanding, a little high maintenance. But at work, she became someone else entirely. More entitled, more arrogant. She flirted just enough to make people want to be around her. She walked into meetings she had no business attending, made suggestions like she was running the place, and the worst part? People listened to her, including my boss. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I decided we needed a break from work. A reset. I planned a family dinner, a chance to bring everyone together to reconnect. Millie wasn't thrilled about it. "Why?" she asked, unimpressed. "You know how my parents are. They'll just talk about money and real estate and make passive-aggressive comments about how I should be doing more. I just think it would be good for us," I said, "to take a step back from all the craziness." She sighed, but agreed. The night of the dinner, Cindy was the first to arrive. I was still setting the table when she walked in, looking slightly uncomfortable, like she didn't quite belong there. "Hey," I said, smiling. "Glad you could make it." She gave me a small, almost shy smile. "Thanks for inviting me." She was different from Millie in every way. Where Millie thrived on being the center of attention, Cindy was subtle. Where Millie's beauty was flashy and commanding, Cindy's was quiet, the kind of beauty that didn't need validation. We started talking, and for the first time I actually got to know her. She was smart, thoughtful, unlike the rest of her family. She actually listened when people spoke. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just existed, effortlessly kind. And for the first time, I saw just how cold her parents were toward her. They barely acknowledged her, barely spoke to her except for the occasional passive comment. They spent most of the night whispering to Millie, glancing around our home, evaluating it like it was some kind of investment property. And then I heard them say something that made my stomach turn. "Once he makes partner, you two should start looking for something bigger." Millie just smiled and nodded. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about us. It was about status, about what I could provide. And the worst part? She was in on it. Things at work were heating up fast. A major contract was on the table, one that could make or break the company. Our biggest competitor wanted it just as badly, and they weren't playing fair. They were trying to poach me, and honestly, I considered it because something was off at my company. My boss was acting strange. He was more paranoid than usual, more controlling. And Millie? She had too much influence. I caught her spending more time in his office than she should. I saw the way he looked at her, the way his demeanor changed when she was around. And yet, I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was overthinking it. But deep down, I knew. Something was happening behind my back. And when I finally found out what it was, it would destroy everything. Some betrayals hit you like a slow-burning fire, eating away at you over time. Others strike like a lightning bolt, so sudden and violent that they leave you breathless, staring at the wreckage of your life before you even understand what happened. Mine was the latter, and the worst part? I should have seen it coming. It was late. The final contract negotiations were happening the next morning, and I had spent the entire evening in my office preparing every last document, every last point that would solidify my company's victory over our competitor. This deal was everything, the kind that could define a career. I had it all ready. The papers, the financials, the data analysis, everything my boss needed to make sure we secured the deal. I walked down the dimly lit hallway toward his office, my mind already half on. Tomorrow, running through my strategy one last time. But then, I heard her voice. Low, soft, playful. And then, his voice. Laughing, amused. Something about the way they spoke sent a chill through me. My grip on the folder tightened as I moved closer, my heartbeat loud in my ears. I didn't want to believe it. I needed to be wrong. But then I heard her say it. "You know I always get what I want." I stopped dead in my tracks. The tone in her voice, it wasn't the way a wife should speak to her husband's boss. It wasn't how an employee should speak to the man who signed her paychecks. It was something else. Something that made my stomach churn. I edged closer, just enough to see through the narrow gap in the office door. And then, my entire world shattered. Millie was perched on his lap, one arm draped around his shoulders, her lips inches from his ear as she whispered something that made him smirk. And then, she kissed him. The folder slipped from my hands, the sound of paper scattering across the floor drowned out by the roaring in my head. I stood there, frozen, watching as my wife, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted, laughed softly and ran her fingers through his hair. Everything made sense now, her sudden ambition, her obsession with power. The way she changed the moment she started working here. It had never been about the job. It had never been about me. She wanted this. She wanted him. Rage boiled in my chest, white-hot and suffocating. I wanted to burst through that door, to rip them apart, to make them feel even a fraction of the humiliation and betrayal I was drowning in. But I didn't. Because anger wouldn't win this battle. If I was going to take them down, I needed to do it right. I took a slow breath, stepped back, and walked away. Tomorrow they would pay. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. Cindy. She picked up after 2 rings. "Hey, what's up?" I didn't know where to start, so I just said it. "Millie's cheating on me." Silence. And then a slow exhale. "With who?" "My boss." Another pause. "Tell me where you are." We met at a quiet cafe, the place empty except for a barista who didn't bother looking up from his phone. Cindy listened as I told her everything. The way Millie had changed. How my boss started acting differently. How the pieces finally fit together. When I finished, she leaned back, her fingers tapping against her coffee cup. "I can help," she said simply. I looked at her. "Why?" Her jaw clenched slightly. "Because she's always gotten away with everything. You think you're the first person she stepped on to get what she wants? You're just the first person who can actually do something about it." I had never heard Cindy talk about her sister that way before. There was a history here, one I didn't fully understand, but I didn't ask, because right now, we had a common enemy. Cindy was an IT specialist. She knew how to get information, how to find things that were hidden, and she had a plan. "You want to ruin them?" she asked. "Yes." "Then let's make sure it hurts." The morning of the final contract meeting, the entire office was in high alert. My boss was sweating through his suit, barking orders, pacing like a man whose entire career was on the line. Because it was, and I was about to destroy it. The conference room was packed. The board of directors, key investors, everyone who mattered was there. I sat across from my boss, my face blank as he shot me a sharp glance. Millie was standing at the side of the room, pretending to be nothing more than his assistant, but the smug look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She thought they had won. She thought she had secured her future. She had no idea what was coming. I waited. Let the meeting start. Let my boss ramble about projections, about how this deal was ours. And then, at the perfect moment, I pulled out a flash drive, placed it on the table, and slid it across the glossy surface, straight to our competitor. The room fell silent. My boss paled. "What the hell are you doing?" I leaned back in my chair. "Leveling the playing field." The head of the rival company picked up the flash drive, plugged it into his laptop, and smiled. Because everything was there. The numbers, the strategies. Every secret piece of data that my boss had counted on to win. He had nothing left. Nothing. He shot to his feet. "You're fired!" I smirked. I was already leaving. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and turned to Millie. She was frozen, panicked, because her entire plan just fell apart in front of her. I walked past her, pausing just long enough to whisper, "You really should have picked a smarter man." And then, I walked out. I didn't look back. I knew what was waiting for me the moment I pulled into the driveway. The cars were already there. Millie's parents, her sister, parked outside our house like vultures circling a fresh corpse. They had already heard. News spread fast. And in their eyes, I had committed the ultimate sin. I stepped out of my car, my posture calm, my heartbeat steady. As I walked up to the front door, I could already hear raised voices inside. The second I stepped in, Millie's mother was on me. "This is your fault," she snapped, her face twisted in rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined everything." Her father, usually the quiet observer, shook his head in disgust. I knew it. I knew you were never good enough for her. Millie was standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed, her expression a mix of frustration and panic. She wasn't mad that I was fired. She was mad that she hadn't controlled the way it happened. "Do you have any idea what you just did to us?" she hissed. Us, not her, not our marriage. Us, because in her mind, my job, my career, my power, it had always belonged to her. I took a deep breath, then reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a neatly folded stack of papers. Millie's eyes flicked to them. "What is that?" she demanded. I didn't answer. I walked past her, set the papers down on the coffee table, and straightened. Her mother's face paled as she read the words at the top. Divorce petition. For the first time that night, the room went completely silent. Millie blinked, shook her head. "No," she said, almost laughing. "You're not serious." I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt absolutely nothing. "I am." Her parents turned on me instantly. "You're going to leave her?" her mother shrieked. "After everything she's done for you?" I actually laughed at that one. "What exactly has she done for me?" Silence. For the first time, they had no answer. Millie stepped forward, her confidence cracking. "Come on. You don't mean this. You're upset. You're acting impulsively." "This isn't impulsive," I cut in. "This is long overdue." She swallowed hard. I saw the moment she realized she had miscalculated. For so long, she had seen me as her foundation, her safety net. She had assumed that no matter what she did, I would always be there. She was wrong. I turned toward the door. "Wait!" Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was desperate. I stopped. But I didn't turn around. "You can't just leave," she said. And this time, I heard something I never expected. Fear. Fear of losing me? No. Fear of losing the life I gave her. I finally turned my head, just enough to meet her gaze. "You needed a stronger man, remember?" And with that, I walked out the door. A few days later, I met Cindy at a small cafe downtown. She was already there when I arrived, her laptop open, a half-empty cup of coffee next to her. She glanced up when she saw me and smirked. "So," she said, "how does it feel?" I sat down across from her. "Like I can breathe for the first time in years." She nodded, taking a sip of her drink. "Good. That means we did it right." There was no gloating, no unnecessary celebration. Just peace. For a long time, we just talked. About life, about work, about everything and nothing at the same time. And as I sat there, listening to her, watching the way she actually cared about what I had to say, I felt something settle inside me. I had spent years fighting to hold on to something that was never worth saving. Now, for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a trap. It felt like an open road. And as for my career, well, our rival company had been waiting for my call, the same company that had tried to recruit me before, the one that had watched me take down my former boss, the one that now wanted me on their side. I accepted their offer, not just because it was a fresh start, but because winning is the best kind of revenge.